I'll be the narrator on the first chunk of the trip at least. Luis will be at the wheel, because if he doesn't drive, we're not going to have much of a tour. We'll just sit here and tell you about the parking lot or something. But as they probably told you, the way the tours work is we take you around to a number of stops. There's a lot to see at each one of those stops. It's your choice. Get off, look at the sights in that area. We go on, and then you come back to where we drop you off. And then you catch the next tram like this or one of those trolleys. It's the same tour, and they take you on to the next stop. Just have your receipt ready. Each time you get on, show that they take you around. Now, you guys are in luck today, because most days we have to shut down a number of these stops here, because you probably noticed this is a cemetery, and at cemeteries they have funerals. And on an average weekday, we'll have 25 to 30 funerals per day. And as you might imagine, they don't like having a tour group coming through in the middle of somebody's funeral. So we have to shut down the stops to avoid those. But today there's no funeral scheduled, so all the stops are open. We take you first to the gravesite of President John F. Kennedy with the Eternal Flame. After that we go to the memorial to the U.S. Coast Guard. Then we go to the gravesite of General John J. Pershing, the most senior military figure buried here. After that we go to the Memorial Amphitheater where the Tomb of the Unknown Soldiers is located. It's guarded by the Sentinels, and where the changing of that guard ceremony takes place. After that, we take you to Arlington House. You know when you came in on the road and you saw the house up there on the hill with the pillars? That's Arlington House, because this whole area used to be a single plantation, and that's where they lived when it was. At least if you were the owner and the master, that's where you lived. Then we take you to a gate at the edge of the cemetery and let you walk out to see the Marine Corps Memorial. It's better known as the Iwo Jima Memorial. It's a multi-figure statue based on that famous photograph of the flag raising at Iwo Jima taken by Joe Rosenthal of the Associated Press. Then we bring it back here. Now, as I say, it used to be a plantation here. There's, back then it was almost twice the size of what it is today. Today, the cemetery is about 1 square mile in size. So, the problem is there's too much to see out here. So, taking these tours is easily the most effective way of taking in the high points in the cemetery plus a fair amount of detail. Because we don't just drive you to those stops, we also point out any number of prominent grave sites along the way. Sometimes a movie was famous, you've heard of. Sometimes a movie you forgot about, you get reminded of. Sometimes a movie you never heard of before, hopefully it'll be interesting to you. Sometimes near the road, easy to see. Sometimes kind of like at middle distance. Sometimes you just have to trust me, they're out there, but I'll point them out when we get close to them. And the convention we use is we point out stuff on the driver's side or the passenger side. Because some people face the rear on these trams and think saying right or left would be confusing. But there's a good supplement. Anybody wanting to do a deeper dive on these tours, there's a mobile app the cemetery puts out called the ANC Explorer, ANC, Arlington National Cemetery. There's 420,000 people buried out here. You can look up any one of them on there. It's got a GPS thing in it. It'll show you how to walk exactly to that gravesite. It's just a lot of walking. But it's the kind of thing you use even when you're home. Because you get home, you think about some of the people you heard about here, you get interested, you look them up in the app, you get more information about them. They give backgrounds on people, list the most visited grave sites. And then you get more interested. You start looking them up on Wikipedia, and then there goes your whole night. But at least you know more about U.S. history. That's the way this place works. Now we'll get underway here and see what we can find for you guys. Just a word about safety. We get 2,000 to 3,000 people a day out here, so you think accidents don't happen out here? Well, they do. So just be real careful. You want to only stand up to get off or on this thing unless it's in a complete stop. Keep the arms and legs inside the perimeter of the tram here. The biggest deterrent I could mention, if you have an accident here, you and we will have about 2 hours of paperwork to fill out. I wouldn't wish that on anybody, okay? Oh, careful too with the cell phones. You know, taking a picture, whoop, it fell on the ground. It's an $800 phone. We can't stop or back up. Just be real careful for it. So no one wants to go through that. Now, once we get through the gate here, you'll get your first glimpse at the standard grave markers that they use out here. Each one is 230 pounds, white Vermont marble. There's a quarry up in Putney, Vermont. They open 3 times a year to carve these. They're provided free by the Department of Veterans Affairs and the families of the deceased. Out of the ground, it's about 43 inches total size, and they put about 98 inches that ground when they're installed. Over here on the passenger side. Now we're coming up with our first prominent grave site, so we'll get a better view of the markers in a minute. But on the other side, still going up the hill here, on the passenger side, that brown pathway there. On the other side of the pathway, second marker in from the left. It's a grave of a guy named Medgar Evers. He's a technical sergeant there at D-Day, World War II. Returned to his home state of Mississippi. He was a secretary for the NAACP. He was investigating hate crimes, including the murder of Emmett Till. And for his trouble, he got assassinated in his own driveway. But he served honorably and thus was buried here 3 days later with military honors. Now you're seeing his marker, and all these you're seeing on the passenger side, those are the standard markers I was referring to. This is one of the classic scenes of Arlington. You see them by the thousands out here. But on the other side, you see other different looking markers? There's thousands of them out here too. Those are always paid for the private family contributions. But you see how they're bigger and they take more space, they take more maintenance. So they decided in 2017 that going forward, they're just going to use the standard markers. Now, as we approach President Kennedy's gravesite, I always started drawing anybody that we have on board with us, or maybe somebody you know in your family you could ask about it, the living history people. Because any of us that remember the day that President Kennedy was shot, you ask anybody, they'll tell you where they were when they heard that news. You don't forget that one. Because Kennedy was like 70% approval rating. He was the youngest guy ever elected to the office. They had young kids in the White House. They just charmed America. And then he was shot in public. So in the days that followed, it's the question, where is he going to be buried? Because the Kennedy family has a plot up in Brookline, Massachusetts. And his mother, Rose Kennedy, wanted him buried there. But then his widow, Jacqueline, was reminded that about 8 months before he was shot, Kennedy was out here at Arlington. He went up to Arlington House. There's a spectacular view of Washington, D.C. from up there. You guys will see it when you get up there. One of the rangers up there heard him say, "This is beautiful. I could stay here forever." And when she heard that story, the decision was made he'd be buried here. Now, if you go down to the visitor center when we're done, part of one of the exhibits shows how she came up with the idea for the Eternal Flame. It's based on the Eternal Flame at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldiers in Paris under the Arc of Triumph. Just to give you a sense of the impact President Kennedy had when he was buried here, the year before there were 2 million visitors to Arlington. And the year after, there were 11 million. People waited in line 2 hours to go by his gravesite like you're about to do now. If you wanted a sad day in America back then, you came to the right place that day. Now, as we pull in here, here where we'll be dropping you off is this pathway we're going by on the driver's side. It's a brown pathway there. See where those folks are walking? If you go down that pathway, then on the right, you'll see a large sarcophagus there. It's a grave of Robert Todd Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln's only offspring that survived into adulthood. Lincoln had 4 kids, 3 of them died from fever. That wasn't that unusual in the 1800s. Aren't you glad you live in the 21st century? Now, as we pull in here on the passenger side, before we get to the Kennedys, this is what we call Supreme Court Hill. Way over there on the left, there's a tall black grave marker with a Star of David on it. It's Ruth Bader Ginsburg and her husband Martin. He served in the armed forces. Near them is Thurgood Marshall, Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr., Warren Burger, William Rehnquist. There's 14 of them there. You'll recognize the other names. See this marker that says Weeks? Well, he was a Secretary of War in the Coolidge. Yeah, there's Ginsburg. You see the rock on top of it? That rock thing, that started as a Jewish tradition. Now everybody does. You'll see them all over here. It means I was at your grave. You meant something to me. This is a leaf vine. And then we're going by. This is where the Kennedys are buried. You see that curved stone structure there on the other side of that? You see all the people there? Then way over to the left, once you're up there, there's 2 white crosses, one each for his brothers Robert and Edward Kennedy, and a memorial marker for his older brother Joe Jr., whose body was lost after a secret mission in World War II. That kind of marker is known as a cenotaph. It means empty grave. Body wasn't recovered. And it'll say in memory of on that marker. And just give us another minute here. Once we're stopped, when you get off, just turn to the right. You go up the ramp there. The Kennedys, as I say, are on the other side of that curved stone structure. Or if they're not there, let me know.
Bears fans get special photos. I feel your pain. Now, Diana, a Packers fan,
Doug, narrator on the next chunk of the trip. Luis is at the wheel. For those of you who stayed on, we're the same people we were before. So, now, we have an immediate problem. There's too many prominent people buried in these sections here, so I'm going to just start firing names at you guys. Over here on the passenger side, you see the tall brown, tall gray marker there. It's got wings on it. On the other side, 4 stars. It's Daniel Chappie James Jr. First 4-star general, African-American ancestry. Is one Air Force guy, one of the original Tuskegee Airmen. And on the other side, you see the guy here on the horse? That's the most senior foreign military figure buried out here. It's British Field Marshal Sir John Dill. He was assigned to Washington, D.C. during World War II. The U.S. military had enormous respect for him. I hope the Allies worked collaboratively together. So when he died in 1944, George C. Marshall made sure he got a prominent place out here. You ever heard of a special relationship between Britain and the United States? Well, they credit this guy for it. And given that the British burned down the White House in the War of 1812, you know, that's a pretty good turnaround. Now, on the other side here, you also find the grave of William Donovan, Wild Bill Donovan, who founded the CIA. It was Lieutenant General Leslie Groves who supervised construction of the Pentagon and co-led the Manhattan Project with Robert Oppenheimer. You saw the Oppenheimer movie, Matt Damon played his role. It's Corporal George Westinghouse out here, fought in the Civil War, founded the well-known consumer appliance firm. There's 2 5-star admirals out there, William Halsey, William Lade, who's too far away to see. There's even Hollywood actress Maureen O'Hara is buried back there. She married Brigadier General Charles Blair. She's buried here as a spouse. Now on the other side, way out there amongst those trees, you see 4 extra large grave markers. The one on, we call that Chaplain's Hill. The marker on the left is a memorial to all those who died providing spiritual support for all religions and all our wars. The other 3 are for the Protestant, Catholic, and Jewish faiths for the 2 world wars, Korea and Vietnam. Now in U.S. history, there's been 9 5-star military men, admirals and generals. 5 of them were buried here at Arlington. I pointed out the 2 5-star admirals here. We're going to go by another one on the driver's side. Just usually you can't see him from the road. It's George C. Marshall, Secretary of Defense and Secretary of State under President Truman. He's best known for developing the Marshall Plan that helped revitalize Europe after World War II. And for that, he received the Nobel Peace Prize. And to this day, he's the only military figure to receive that prize. Now, on the other side, coming up, equally famous American, very different part of our culture, is Joe Louis, the heavyweight boxing champion of the world, 1937, 1949. Signed up for World War II immediately. Mainly fought exhibition matches during the war to boost troop morale. He is buried out here on the passenger side by a tall brown marker. He was known as the Brown Bomber. Ran into Texas towards the end of his life, so Frank Sinatra paid for his marker here. And then immediately, he's right there. You see the large tree there, and then the brown marker with the flowers on it. Then immediately to the left of him, that white standard marker is the Hollywood actor Lee Marvin, who was a Marine and a Purple Heart recipient. Also in this section is Lieutenant General James Doolittle, led the famous Doolittle raid on the Japanese home islands, one of the first American responses to the bombing of Pearl Harbor. And once we get past the trees here on the passenger side, you'll get your first clear-cut view of the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. Behind it is the Memorial Amphitheater. You can probably make out the Sentinels up there. We'll have you up there in a few minutes. I'll pause as we pass out of respect. The second road there goes by quickly. There's a marker with the name Lejeune on it. I bet you guys heard of Camp Lejeune in North Carolina for the U.S. Marines. It's John A. Lejeune, 13th Commandant U.S. Marine Corps, known as the Marines Marine, after whom the camp was named. And let's see, everybody might remember who John Glenn was. He's out here in Section 35. Combat pilot, one of the original Mercury astronauts, first American to orbit the Earth, 4-term senator from Ohio. They had trouble cramming all that in his grave marker. An inspiration to all of us. He's the oldest guy at the time of going on a space flight. Age 77, he went to the space station. Now, on the passenger side, way out on the distant hillside there, you'll see a lot of markers are a lot closer together. They can do that because there's no human remains there. They call those cenotaphs. Cenotaph means empty grave. These are people qualified to be buried at Arlington, but the body was lost or donated to medical science, whatever the reason might be. If you get closer, you'll see the inscription will say, "In memory of." I always try to get a sense of what generations I have with me here, because I told my son Glenn Miller has a cenotaph here. He said, "Who's Glenn Miller?" It's this music guy in the important. We'll handle that later. Now, on top of the hill here, there's a couple of prominent medical figures. I bet you guys have heard of the Walter Reed Medical Center. Major Walter Reed is buried there. Discovered how yellow fever is transmitted. Albert Sabin is buried there. Developed the oral polio vaccine. So it was discoveries like that. There's development of triage in the battlefield, particularly the introduction of nurses that help boost the survival rate of our soldiers. In the earlier wars, the medical was so shaky, we would lose more men off the battlefield than on the battlefield. Now, once we get through the intersection here, we'll go into section 34, a number of group burial sites here. People all died in the same incident and all buried together. Most prominent is this 8-sided marker for the USS Serpent. It was a Coast Guard ammunition ship. It was offloading depth charges in the Battle of Guadalcanal. It was an accident. Blew up, killed about 250 sailors. It was the greatest disaster in Coast Guard history. Those larger gray markers, it's the same concept. People all died in the same incident. They're all buried there together. Also in section 34 here, you can find the grave of Frank Buckles, the last veteran of World War I. Died in 2011 at the age of 110. Also, Corporal Ira Hayes is buried out here, Native American, one of 2 guys buried here at the cemetery, and appears in that famous photograph of the flag raising at Iwo Jima, taken by Joe Rosenthal in the Associated Press. Also in this section, Spy Sergeant General Hap Arnold, led the U.S. Army Air Corps, later the Air Force, one of the Navy Separate Service. He got into aviation early. His first signing was from the Wright brothers. Now, on the top of the hill here, section 4, there's a slanted grave mark there at the top, one of the most famous politicians in U.S. history, William Jennings Bryan, author of the famous Cross and Gold speech, nominated 3 times for the U.S. presidency. Secretary of State under President Wilson, prosecuting attorney at the Scopes Monkey trial in Tennessee. Also in this section is Robert Dole, senator from Kansas, twice nominated for national office. Neither guy got elected, but both served honorably, and also buried here at arms. Now on the other side, way out there, it's hard to see this time of year with the trees. You look backwards and look a little further along. That's the Pentagon out there. It's the site that was hit by the terrorists on 9/11. Also, a lot of additional land out there slated to be added to Arlington. What is easy to see is the 3 tall, curved white spires there. They form the Air Force Memorial, designed to evoke the bomb burst formation, flown by the Air Force Flying Demonstration Team, the Thunderbirds. And that'll take us into our next stop, which is the memorial to the U.S. Coast Guard. Like the Serpent, it was brought about by the loss of about 150 sailors on 2 Coast Guard cutters, the Tampa and the Seneca, lost the U-boat, lost within 10 days of each other in the Atlantic during World War I. That pyramid-shaped structure there. Now it's a memorial to all those who have served, do serve, or will serve in the U.S. Coast Guard. Anybody wanting to go up here and take a look around, I'd also point out that globe-shaped marker there is for Admiral Robert Peary. He's the first guy to reach the North Pole on foot, and his assistant Matthew Henson, who accompanied him, is buried there under the black marker. There's some controversy about which guy actually got there first, but we'll leave that to another day. Yeah, it's probably best you didn't get off there because they do such a great job on the lawn there. You can develop what they call lawn envy. Because you think about your lawn at home, you know. Actually, Arlington is rated a level 3 arboretum. It's one of 3 cemeteries in the world at that level. Level 4 is the highest. You've got to be a research institution. We have 10,000 trees out here, about 400 varieties. So if we have any tree huggers with us today, this is your moment. And I can always look away if you need a private moment. Now, you guys heard of the Navy Seabees, the Navy Construction Battalion, Seabees, like the Army Corps of Engineers. They can build anything. You need a hospital, an airstrip, well, they'll build it, and fast, and a lot of times under fire. And I mention all that, so we're going to go by the guy's father of the Navy Seabees out there, 4-star Admiral named Ben Muriel. He's there in the 4th row with the 4 stars, and actually carving his mother, Marvin, father of the Seabees. Must have been proud of that, rightly so. Now on the way to the next stop, which is the graveside of General John J. Blackjack Pershing. He's the only individual in U.S. history to be promoted during his lifetime to the rank of General of the Armies, plural, meaning all U.S. military forces reported to him. So clearly he was a 6-star general. They never came up with an insignia for that level. So a guy that's senior, he could have been buried anywhere he wanted out here with an elaborate grave marker. Now in the time I've been here, when I meet actual veterans, I don't know what I was expecting, but I'm always struck by their modesty. General Pershing must have been cut from the same cloth, because despite his seniority, he just requested the standard grave marker for his grave. One thing he did ask was that he be buried overlooking the men he led in World War I, who were known as the Doughboys. So he's buried out there on the passenger side, the crest of that hill. I've been out there. It's one of the most peaceful parts of this cemetery. He's buried there with 2 of his grandsons, both of whom fought in Vietnam, one of whom died in the Tet Offensive. Anybody wanting to get off here, just go through the section there. Well, I guess we'll. Now, let me just touch on medals of honor. There's been about a little more than 3,500 of those conferred over the years. About 400 of them here at Arlington. Whenever you see gold lettering on the grave marker, that's almost always a Medal of Honor recipient. 19 guys have received 2 Medals of Honor for separate acts. There are 5 guys in U.S. history who received 2 Medals of Honor for the same act. One of them was buried out there at that tree there in Section 18, that middle distance to the larger tree there. Native John Pruitt. He was on duty in France, World War I. He encountered 40 Germans. He killed 2 of them. He took their machine gun and used that to take the remainder of them captive. He suffered a number of wounds and then died the following day of shrapnel wounds. It was his 22nd birthday. There's a phrase about Arlington: all gave some gave all. So it's easy to imagine the number of years of life that thing gave up. And as we consider World War I, that large cross out there you see on the driver's side, the white cross there, that's the Argonne Cross. Memorial to all those who served in World War I. Those fought in the Battle of the Argonne Forest. That's where the trees there go over the forest. Deadliest battle of World War I, 29,000 deaths, not just casualties out of that single battle. Maybe that's part of why they called it the war to end all wars, at least for a few years. Now, on the other side here, Section 11, a number of astronauts buried out there. One of the easiest to spot is that black marker there with the name Conrad on it. The wings, that's Pete Conrad, the third man to walk on the moon. Now, as we approach the changing of the guard ceremony, you know, I'd say American culture is pretty informal as a rule. This is definitely an exception. The cemetery itself is static in nature. This is active, continuous tribute by the nation to its fallen. And most symbolic, given that no one knows for sure who's buried here. You've been alive since 1948. Every minute of your life there's been somebody out here guarding this tomb, day and night, regardless of the weather. The duties are performed by the 3rd Infantry Regiments, also known as the Old Guard, the oldest active regiment in the Army. Visitors are welcome. We just ask that you remain standing or remain silent during the ceremony. You might check the cell phones to make sure they're on silent mode. If time face permitted, we just request no flash for talking to ladies. And the times have changed. Starting 2021, they had the first all-female changing of the guard ceremony. The female soldiers permanently signed the regiment now. You know, whoever gets the job done. Now, we saw the deadliest battle of World War I there. As we come around the corner here, the pediment there with the 2 pillars is memorial to the deadliest battle of World War II, the Battle of the Bulge, largest land battle in U.S. history. And that'll take us in to the nurses section on the driver's side here. As I mentioned, nurses made an enormous difference when they were first allowed in combat areas beginning with the Spanish-American War. That nurse statue there is from World War I. Looks out over about 600 compatriot nurses buried there. But also behind her on that hill, you find the grave of Chief Justice Earl Warren of the U.S. Supreme Court, John Foster Dulles, Secretary of State under President Eisenhower, to whom Dulles Airport is named, and Henry Kissinger, Secretary of State under Presidents Nixon and Ford, who was recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize. That tall column you see there with the wings on it, Corinthian column there, that's memorial to the Spanish-American Wars, dedicated here in 1902 by Teddy Roosevelt. Those cannons in front of it are Spanish cannons taken from the battlefield. And on the other side here, opposite it, you see the tree here with the granite marker in front of it. It's a memorial to the helicopter pilots in the Vietnam War. And then immediately behind it, there's a gap in the markers there, and then the gray marker with the leaf on it, that is John Glenn's grave. And as we pull in here, over on the driver's side, you'll see a large tree with a pathway around it. It's from the grave of Audie Murphy, the most decorated enlisted man in U.S. history. This guy won 47 medals from the U.S. and Allies. At the end of World War II, he was 19 years old, went on to a career in Hollywood as a writer. So many people still come to visit him. That's why they put that pathway there around the tree. Now this is where we drop you off for the changing of the guard. We don't pick you up here. We'll pick you up about 100 yards down the way. You'll see people lining up there. This big building with the arches, you go around the bend behind that. That's where the tomb is located, where the ceremony takes place. It started 2 minutes ago. So you're in the middle of it. You might want to stay around and see the next one at the bottom.
Shoulder. Arms. Forward. March. Guard. Halt. Forward. March. Guard. Halt. Heart. Arm. Ready. Hey. Reset. Arm. Heart. Arm. Ready. Hey. Hands. On your order.
Post and order. Remain as directed.
Order. Acknowledge. Ready. Hey. Reset. Arms. Right. Shoulder. Arms. Post. Right.
think that was it. I think that was it. Excuse me, guys.
All military personnel in uniform will render the hand salute, and it is appropriate for all others to place their right hand over their heart upon the command of present arms. Thank you.
Trees, head! Oh!
I'm just going to reiterate a few things. Here in a few minutes, I'm going to turn around. Once I reach the top of the stairs, I'll send out our master, please join me by my side. And as at that point in time, you kind of get shoulder to shoulder with me, not too far away, not too close. And if you would like to kind of maintain the same distance, right next to her as well. I'll give the command, ready, set. And that command will kind of signify the beginning of the ceremony. And we walk down the stairs together. Trying to go too far ahead of me, straight too far behind. We stop at the green brick just before that black line. It's strictly very decisive, you don't see that's all right, as long as you stand by my side. Okay. Right there, reach your middle, push it to the green. You have to place both hands on the wall. And as it except for the last kind of hands on the wall. Do a few steps forward, walk along, and lay on that side. And then as you feel to my side, so try to come right back, just to me. Turn around again, face it to the right, and automatically place your right hand over your heart. Once that's a play, get the command order on. Place your right hand back down to your side. After, please turn around. I'll walk around, guys. Say the command ready, step again, and come right back up here. You guys got it? No questions at all? Alright, perfect.
Ready, set, on!
guys have an amazing trip here in Washington, D.C. Safe travels back home. Thank you, sir.
Shields engraved on the front side. That is the older style of standard issue grave marker and are primarily for soldiers from the 19th century. Section 13, you can also find the original owners of the Arlington house, back when the property was part of a 1,100-acre corn and wheat plantation. That was George Washington Parke Custis and his wife Mary Lee Fitzhugh. George Washington Parke Custis had the Arlington house constructed as a memorial to his step-grandfather, President George Washington. Passed down the property to his daughter, Mariana Randolph Custis. She married a distant cousin and bribed lieutenant in the U.S. Army, Robert E. Lee. Lee lived on this property for around 30 years, so the property rights always belonged to his wife. At the outbreak of the Civil War, President Lincoln asked Lee to take command of the Union Army. Lee was from Virginia and refused to raise arms against Virginians. In 1861, he left the Arlington house and went down to Richmond. He went on to command the Confederate Army. No Lee family member has lived at the house since, in life or in death. Towards the end of the Civil War, President Lincoln appointed Brigadier General Montgomery C. Meigs to take 200 acres of the plantation and develop it into a cemetery. Today, Arlington Cemetery is 639 acres, with over 420,000 service members and their loved ones interred on these grounds. On our passenger side will be an equestrian statue. That is Major General Philip Kearny. He's missing his left hand. He lost his left hand during the Mexican-American War. Later he lost his life during the Civil War, the Battle of Chantilly. Major General Kearny in view on our passenger side. On our passenger side, we'll also see the James Tanner Amphitheater, named for President Lincoln's stenographer. James Tanner was a double amputee and advocate for disabled veterans. He's interred in Section 2, directly behind the amphitheater. This amphitheater was used to hold some of the first Decoration Day ceremonies, and loved ones decorated graves of fallen service members. That day is better known now as Memorial Day. On our passenger side is also the largest group burial marker in the cemetery, with about 2,100 remains. The tomb of the Civil War unknown. 1,700 of those remains come from the Battle Bull Run alone. The tomb was constructed in the Lee family's rose garden to deter them from wanting to return to Arlington House following the Civil War. It's one of the oldest monuments constructed at the cemetery. We're now reaching our stop for the Arlington House. When you come back to your tour at this stop, you'll line up behind the blue sign along the black benches. Please do not line up on the disabled access ramp. Please watch your steps if you're exiting the tram. Arlington Woods. These woods give a good glimpse of what this property looked like prior to the Civil War. It was primarily a corn and wheat plantation. Both livestock and timber were kept on the property to be used as a product and to help maintain the plantation itself. Today, the Arlington Woods are maintained by the National Park Service. They're part of the reason the cemetery gets a lot of wildlife. There are deer here, there are coyotes here. There's even a few wild turkeys who roam about the graves. The Arlington Woods are also why the cemetery is classified as a Level 3 Arboretum. There's almost 10,000 trees on the property of over 300 varieties. 142 of those trees were designated as memorial trees. Memorial trees are all privately funded. You would have seen them throughout the cemetery. There are trees with plaques at the bottom side of them. Often they're dedicated to groups of service members or to various conflicts. There is one memorial tree dedicated to an individual, Major Alton Glenn Miller. A band leader went down over Europe during World War II. His remains were never recovered. We are currently on our way to the access point for the Iwo Jima statue. On February 19, 1945, 80,000 Americans, led by the Marine Corps, invaded the island of Iwo Jima. There's about 60,000 Marine Corps service members and 20,000 Navy service members. The 28th Regiment of the 5th Division were ordered to capture the highest point of the island, an extinct volcano, Mount Suribachi. It took them 2 days to reach the base of the volcano. In addition to this battle being fought in the middle of winter, in Japanese, Iwo Jima means sulfur island. Anytime enemy shells exploded around the Marine Corps, the stench of sulfur filled the air. It was on the 23rd of February, the Easy Company 2nd Battalion would climb to the top of the volcano and raise a small American flag around 10:30 in the morning. They were worried the flag was not visible to the service members on the opposite side of the island. So later that same afternoon, 6 Marines raised a much larger, more visible flag. That flag raising was captured by Associated Press photographer Joseph Rosenthal. It's that iconic photograph the U.S. Marine Corps War Memorial depicts. On our passenger side is Section 28. This section holds a lot of mid-20th century interments, from primarily the Korean War and the Vietnam War. And in this section you can also find the Vietnam War Memorial Tree and the Korean War Memorial Tree. On our driver's side will be a newer area to the cemetery. This will be the Millennium Project. It was completed in 2019 and made space for 28,000 additional interments, some of which are above ground. Above ground interments are all cremated remains and take place in columbarium courts. We can see one of the columbarium courts on our driver's side. Columbarium courts 10 through 13 are located on this side of the cemetery, while courts 1 through 9 are located on the east side of the cemetery. A columbarium court is full of niche spaces. Each niche space can hold 3 to 4 urns for the service member and for their loved ones. There are also below-ground interments as part of the Millennium Project, such as Section 82. The first interment in Section 82 was for Staff Sergeant R.Lee Ermey, actor and Marine Corps drill instructor, best known for his role in the movie Full Metal Jacket. He also voiced the toy soldiers in the first 3 Toy Stories. In a few moments, we'll be entering the oldest section of the cemetery, which is actually Section 27. The first military personnel were interred in Section 27 in May of 1864. The first interment was for Private William Henry Crispin, who passed of the measles during the Civil War. Section 27 will be starting to come into view on both sides of our vehicle, but specifically on our passenger side. We're going to start to see some very small grave markers. They only go a few inches above the ground. They have square tops. These will be for soldiers, unknown soldiers from the Civil War. Section 27 on our passenger side. This section is also about 1,500 grave markers that will say USCT on them. That stands for United States Colored Troops, the first organized unit of African American soldiers. They served under the Union Army during the Civil War. Now in view on both sides of our vehicle are grave markers that will say citizen or civilian on them. There's about 3,800 of these grave markers. They were for the African American citizens who lived in the freedmen's villages that surround the Arlington estate around the period of the Civil War. And by that time the property had been seized for the Union Army. In a moment on our driver's side and outside the cemetery, we're able to see the Netherlands Caroline, gifted to the United States by the Dutch as thanks for American aid during World War II. The Netherlands Caroline is a gray metallic structure. It has 53 bells inside it and plays music throughout the year, typically about every 15 minutes or so. We're coming into view on our driver's side as we come past these trees. The Netherlands Caroline. You need to walk past it in order to visit the U.S. Marine Corps War Memorial. While it's famously known as the Iwo Jima statue, it's dedicated to all Marine Corps service members since 1776. The list of every completed conflict the Marine Corps have taken part in is around the base of the statue. The statue itself is 78 feet tall and weighs over 100 tons. The flag of the statue flies at full staff 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. There are 2 flag raisers who are interred at Arlington Cemetery. In Section 12, you have Sergeant Michael Strink. Section 34 is Corporal Ira Hayes. We can hear the bells of the Netherlands Caroline at this time. Our stop to access the Iwo Jima Memorial will be at the Ord and Whiteslow gates. There are 2 tall white columns we'll see in front of our vehicle on our passenger side, named for Edward Ord and Godfrey Whiteslow. These were the original north entrance to the cemetery and were designed by Brigadier General Montgomery C. Beggs, Quartermaster of the Army and founder of Arlington Cemetery. The Ord and Whiteslow gates in view on our passenger side. In order to access the Iwo Jima Memorial, you do have to exit the cemetery from our driver's side. You can exit these gates. You can also re-enter the cemetery through these gates. Please watch your step if you are exiting the tram at this time.
There's nobody here. There's nobody here.
All right. Sorry about that.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Lydia. Lydia. You can go.
We'll be heading back to the Welcome Center for the end of the tour today. Please remain seated while the tram is in motion. On our passenger side is section 51. 3 rows into this section is a grave marker with a plaque on the back side of it. That plaque is a relief of the flag raising that took place at the top of Mount Suribachi. That is the grave marker of Private First Class Rene Gagnon. Originally believed he was one of the 6 flag raisers in the iconic photograph. While he was not in the photograph itself, he was there that day at the top of the volcano. He was the runner for Easy Company. His family wanted him to be interred as close to the U.S. Marine Corps War Memorial as possible. Arlington Cemetery gets a lot of wildlife. This property has a lot of foliage. This land would all greatly contrast to any land in Europe in which battles were fought on during World War I. That was the first great mechanized war. The first forward tanks were used for chemical weapons like chlorine gas were used. On the land, 1,000 plots became so scarred and so battered that nothing would grow there. Nothing, that is, except small red flowers indigenous to Western Europe, the poppy. A Canadian soldier named John McCrae was stationed in the Belgian Flanders. He took note of these flowers growing around the graves of his fallen compatriots while attending a funeral service for one of his friends. It inspired him to write a poem, originally known as We Shall Not Sleep. Here's how that poem goes. In Flanders fields the poppies blow. Between the crosses, row on row. The mark out place, and in the sky, the larks still bravely singing fly, scarce heard amid the guns below. We are the dead, short days ago we lived. Felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, now we lie, Flanders fields. The poem is more widely known today as In Flanders Fields, and it's part of the reason poppies became a symbol of military sacrifice and remembrance known the world over. At the end of our tour, I'll be handing out free synthetic poppies to remember your time at Arlington Cemetery. Dishes are worn over the heart on military holidays of remembrance. The first stop on our tour here today was the gravesite of President John F. Kennedy. All presidents are eligible to be interred at Arlington Cemetery by nature of their position as Commander-in-Chief. There are only 2 presidents who are interred here. The first president to be interred here was in 1930, our 27th president, William Howard Taft. President Taft is the only president who's ever presided over the judicial branch of our government. That's because following his term as president, he was appointed the 10th Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. He much preferred that job to being the president. He found being the president much too isolating, once calling it the loneliest job in the world. President Taft is also the first Supreme Court Justice to be interred on the grounds of the cemetery. And he's interred with his wife, Helen Heron Taft, affectionately known as Nellie. Nellie went on to start a big tradition in the D.C. area when she planted the first seeds of Japanese cherry blossom trees around the tidal basin, alongside the wife of the Japanese ambassador. President Taft and Nellie's final resting place will be coming into view on our passenger side in just a few moments. There'll be a tall tan obelisk at the end of a paved tan walkway. This will be the Taft family gravesite. Starting to come into view on our passenger side is the Taft family gravesite, the tall tan obelisk. In the section to the left side of this tan walkway and in the second row, there's a grave marker with 5 stars in a circle directly next to the tree. That is the grave marker of 5-star General Omar Bradley. He commanded 1.3 million troops during World War II. He was known for the compassion he held for the troops under his command. He gave the moniker of the GI's General. He was the most recently appointed 5-star officer in our military. He passed in 1981. On our passenger side, we're seeing the large gray structure that is the Military Women's Memorial. There's a museum inside the memorial. It holds a history of women in military service from the Revolutionary War to the present. And on our driver's side, you can see the Lincoln Memorial. And the memorial bridge connects back to the cemetery that was constructed to symbolize the reunification of the North and South following the Civil War. The North represented by Lincoln, the South by Arlington House, where the Lee family lived for 30 years. While we come back to the Welcome Center, I'd like to take this time to say, if you are serving, if you have served, if you are loved ones of those who are serving or have served, thank you for your service, sacrifice, and dedication to our country. If you have any loved ones interred on the grounds of the cemetery, there's a free gravesite shuttle service. It can take you directly to the section your loved one is interred. To access that service, you need a ticket that you can pick up from the host, the pavilion, or inside the Welcome Center. If you came to our tour from Old Town Tri-Tours in DC today, you need to take the Lincoln Shuttle to take you back over to continue that tour in DC, pick you up from our passenger side. They have ground bench, you can wait until that vehicle comes around. It should be this van on our passenger side. My name is Lucy, I've been your narrator. The driver was Jeremiah, guiding us back into the Welcome Center. Don't forget to pick up a coffee for me outside the front of the tram. I can also answer questions you might have while on your tour here today. Please remain seated until the tram has come to a complete stop. Please watch your step as you exit the vehicle. On behalf of Historic Tours of America, thank you for joining us and have a wonderful rest of your day.